I, 23M, never thought I'd be writing something like this, but recent events have left me feeling confused and angry. This is a long story, so bear with me. My childhood was pretty normal until I lost my mom to cancer when I was 8. Those first 2 years after her death were rough. My dad worked long hours at his construction company to keep himself busy, and I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. When I was 10, my dad met Brianna at some work event. They dated for about 6 months before getting married, and suddenly I had a stepmother and a 12-year-old stepbrother named Miles. From the beginning, Brianna made it clear that Miles was her priority. She would constantly compare us, always finding ways to make Miles seem better. If I got a B+ in math, she would point out how Miles got an A. If I won second place in a school competition, she would remind everyone how Miles won first place in something else. My dad, probably afraid of rocking the boat in his new marriage, usually sided with Brianna or stayed quiet. The favoritism wasn't just about achievements. When Miles needed new clothes or sports equipment, Brianna would take him shopping immediately. When I needed something, I would hear about how money was tight and I should be more careful with my things. Even on birthdays, Miles's celebrations were always bigger, with more guests and better presents. My dad would try to make it up to me privately, sometimes slipping me extra money or taking me out for ice cream, but he never stood up to Brianna about her obvious favoritism. Despite all this, I tried to maintain a decent relationship with Miles. He wasn't a bad guy, just spoiled. We shared a love for video games and would often play together after school. He would sometimes even stand up for me when Brianna was being particularly unfair, though these moments became rarer as we got older and he realized how much he benefited from being the favorite. After high school, Miles got accepted into a good college about 3 hours away. Brianna and my dad threw this huge graduation party for him and helped him set up his dorm room with all new furniture and electronics. When I graduated 2 years later, I got a simple dinner at home. I had decided to take a different path. I started working at a local car dealership while taking online business classes. The job paid well enough, but with rent prices in our area being ridiculous, it made sense to keep living at home. This is where things got interesting. Brianna suddenly announced that if I wanted to stay, I needed to pay rent. She set it at $800 per month, which was steep considering I was also paying for my own food, phone, car insurance, and classes. When I pointed out that Miles never had to pay rent when he was home during breaks or summer vacations, Brianna said that was different because he was a full-time student. My dad, as usual, just shrugged and said it seemed fair. I agreed to pay because it was still cheaper than getting my own place, and I figured I could save up faster this way. For 2 years, I paid my rent on time every month, kept to myself, and focused on my work and studies. Miles would come home during breaks, making messes that I would often have to clean up because Brianna insisted that he needed to rest during his time off from school. 7 months ago, Miles called home with some news. His girlfriend Hannah was pregnant. They'd only been dating for 4 months, having met at some college party. Hannah came from a super religious family who didn't take the news well. When they found out about the pregnancy, they gave her an ultimatum: either terminate the pregnancy or leave their house. Hannah chose to keep the baby, so her parents kicked her out. Miles called our parents asking if he and Hannah could move in temporarily. He said they needed time to save money for their own place and prepare for the baby. Brianna was ecstatic about becoming a grandmother and immediately said yes. My dad agreed without hesitation. Neither of them bothered to discuss this with me, even though I was the one actually paying rent to live there. The next day, Brianna called me into the living room for a family meeting. She and my dad sat me down and told me I needed to move out within a week because they wanted to convert my room into a nursery. Their reasoning? My room was bigger and got better natural light, making it perfect for a baby. When I pointed out that I had been paying rent while Miles never had to, Brianna got angry. She called me selfish and immature, saying I should be more understanding of Miles's situation. She said I had been freeloading long enough, completely ignoring the $800 I paid them every month for the past 2 years. I tried explaining that finding a new place to live on such short notice was nearly impossible in our area. Rents were high, most places had waiting lists, and I hadn't planned for rental deposits and moving costs. Brianna's response? You're 23 years old. Figure it out. My dad just sat there staring at his hands, not saying a word to defend me. Miles and Hannah moved in 2 days later while I was still trying to figure out my living situation. Hannah seemed nice enough, but she was clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Miles, who knew I paid rent, didn't say anything in my defense. He just kept talking about their plans for their nursery, my room that I was still living in and paying for. Thankfully, my best friend Mike came through for me. He had a 2-bedroom apartment and his roommate had just moved out. He offered to let me move in immediately and even helped me pack my things. When I was moving out, Brianna and my dad didn't lift a finger to help. They were too busy helping Miles and Hannah set up my old room, painting walls and assembling baby furniture before I had even finished moving my stuff out. After I moved out, I kept minimal contact with my family. Miles would occasionally text me about the pregnancy and their plans for the nursery, seeming completely oblivious to how messed up the situation was. I kept my responses short and civil, mainly for the sake of my future niece or nephew. Living with Mike has been great. The rent is actually cheaper when split between two people, and I don't have to deal with Brianna's constant favoritism anymore. I've been able to save more money and focus on my own life without the constant drama. Yesterday, my phone started blowing up with calls and texts from Brianna and my dad. I ignored them at first, but after what felt like the 20th call, I finally picked up. What I heard left me speechless. Miles had run away with his coworker Lisa, leaving behind Hannah, who had given birth to their daughter just 2 weeks ago. Apparently, he left a note saying he never wanted to be a father and had been in love with Lisa for months. Brianna was crying, saying they needed me to move back home because they couldn't afford the mortgage without my rent money. They also wanted me to help take care of Hannah and the baby since Miles was gone. I laughed and hung up. They've been calling nonstop since then, leaving voicemails about how family should stick together and how I'm being heartless. My dad even texted saying they would let me have my old room back since Hannah and the baby could stay in Miles's room now. Ida for refusing to move back and help? Update 1 first, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments on my last post. Reading them helped me realize I wasn't crazy for feeling angry about this situation. A lot has happened in the past 2 weeks, and the situation has gotten even more twisted than I imagined. After my last post, I kept thinking about Hannah and the baby. Even though I was angry with my family, I couldn't stop wondering about their welfare. After all, Hannah was basically a stranger in my parents' house with a newborn baby, abandoned by her boyfriend and her own family. Despite everything, I didn't want her to feel as alone as I did when I was kicked out. I got her number from an old group chat and reached out to her directly. We met for coffee while Brianna and my dad were at work, and what Hannah told me made my blood boil. It turns out Miles's disappearance wasn't some sudden decision. He had been planning this for months, even before Hannah got pregnant. Hannah showed me text messages between Miles and Lisa dating back 8 months. They had been dating secretly while Miles was with Hannah, meeting up during his study group sessions. When Hannah got pregnant, Miles didn't break things off with Lisa. Instead, they started planning their escape together. The messages revealed everything. Miles had convinced everyone he needed to stay at our parents' house to save money for the baby, but he was actually saving up to move away with Lisa. He had opened a separate bank account that only Lisa had access to, and he had been transferring money into it every week. All those times he said he couldn't help Hannah buy baby supplies because he was saving for their future, he was actually funding his escape plan. There were messages where Miles complained to Lisa about how Hannah's pregnancy had ruined their timeline and how they needed to lay low until they could leave without legal consequences. Lisa had even helped Miles research what would happen if he left before the baby was born versus after. They decided to wait until after the birth so he wouldn't face additional legal issues. But here's the real kicker, Brianna and my dad knew about Miles's relationship with Lisa for the last 3 months. Hannah found evidence on Brianna's phone when she borrowed it to call her doctor. There were text messages between Brianna and Miles where she was actually helping him plan his escape. Brianna had been telling Miles to wait until after the baby was born, advising him on how to hide money, and even suggesting ways to make it look like he was committed to Hannah and the baby. All this time, they knew Miles was planning to abandon Hannah and the baby. They kicked me out of my room, made Hannah move in, and pretended everything was fine, knowing their precious Miles was going to leave her high and dry. Brianna had convinced herself that Miles would change his mind once he saw his baby, but that obviously didn't happen. When I confronted Brianna with this information, she completely broke down. Through her tears, she admitted everything. She said she thought she was protecting Miles from making a terrible mistake by getting trapped with someone he didn't love. She actually tried to justify it by saying she was thinking of the baby, that it would be better for Miles to leave early rather than resent the child forever. My dad's response was even worse. He tried to defend their actions by saying they were just trying to help their son avoid ruining his life. When I pointed out that they had ruined Hannah's life in the process, he said that wasn't their problem. He actually had the nerve to say that Hannah should have been more careful if she didn't want to end up in this situation. I helped Hannah contact a lawyer who specializes in family law. The lawyer said Hannah has a strong case for child support, especially with all the evidence of Miles's premeditated abandonment. She's now pursuing legal action against Miles, and the lawyer is also looking into whether Brianna and my dad could be held liable for their role in hiding Miles's assets. When Brianna and my dad found out about the lawyer, they completely flipped out. They've been calling and texting nonstop, alternating between begging me to stop helping Hannah and threatening me with being cut off from the family. Brianna even tried to claim that by helping Hannah, I was betraying Miles and choosing a stranger over family. The most absurd part? They're still trying to convince me to move back in, saying they need my help even more now because of the legal action against Miles. They want me to talk Hannah out of pursuing child support, claiming it will ruin Miles's future. They seem to care more about protecting Miles from the consequences of his actions than about their own granddaughter. I finally blocked their numbers yesterday. Mike suggested I keep records of all their messages and calls in case they try to cause problems for me later. I've given copies of everything to Hannah's lawyer. Hannah and her baby have moved in with a women's support group that helps single mothers. She's doing surprisingly well considering everything that's happened. She's also documented everything meticulously, from Miles's messages to bank statements showing his secret transfers. I still can't believe how deep this betrayal goes. Not only did they kick me out unfairly, but they actively participated in a plan to abandon an innocent woman and her newborn baby. And now they have the audacity to ask for my help? It's like they live in some alternate reality where their actions have no consequences. I'll update again if anything significant happens, but for now, I'm focusing on my own life and helping Hannah where I can. Sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you're born into. Update 2: The situation has taken several more dramatic turns since my last update. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, Miles reached out to me through a burner phone number last week. After 3 months of complete silence, he suddenly wanted to tell his side of the story. According to Miles, he never really loved Hannah. He claimed their relationship was just casual until she trapped him with a pregnancy. He told me he had been in love with Lisa for over a year, and Hannah knew about their relationship but got pregnant anyway to force him to stay. He tried to paint himself as the victim, saying he felt pressured by everyone's expectations and couldn't see any other way out. Miles also revealed that he and Lisa are now living in another state. He refused to tell me which one, but said they're starting fresh where nobody knows them. He tried to justify abandoning his daughter by saying he would have been a terrible father anyway, so it was better for everyone if he just left. The whole conversation made me sick to my stomach. Something about his story didn't add up, so I decided to do some digging. Through social media, I managed to contact Lisa's former roommate, Maria. She told me a completely different story that exposed just how calculated this whole situation was. According to Maria, Lisa and Miles had been planning this for almost a year before Hannah got pregnant. They wanted to move away together but needed money. Miles knew our parents would never support him leaving Hannah, especially with a baby on the way, so they came up with this elaborate plan. The scheme was more calculated than anyone realized. Miles deliberately moved back home with Hannah, knowing our parents would let them stay rent-free. He convinced everyone he was saving money for the baby while secretly funneling most of his paycheck into a hidden account. Lisa had even helped him set up a fake budget to show our parents, making it look like all his money was going toward baby expenses. What Miles didn't count on was Hannah's meticulous record-keeping. She had saved every text, every email, and kept detailed records of their conversations and financial transactions. She even had recordings of conversations where Miles admitted to their plan, as her state allows one-party recording consent. The real bombshell came when Maria shared some old text messages between her and Lisa. In these messages, Lisa bragged about how she and Miles had been planning this even before Hannah got pregnant. They had actually hoped Hannah would choose to terminate the pregnancy when her parents gave her the ultimatum. When she didn't, they adjusted their plan to wait until after the birth to avoid additional legal complications. Brianna and my dad are now facing their own problems. Since they knew about Miles's plan and actively helped him hide assets while pretending to help Hannah, they might be considered complicit in the abandonment. Hannah's lawyer is looking into whether they can be held legally responsible since they helped Miles conceal assets and plan his disappearance while pretending to support Hannah. The lawyer says their text messages to Miles, where they helped him plan his escape and hide money, could be used as evidence of their involvement. There's also the fact that they kicked out their rent-paying tenant, me, to facilitate this plan, which shows premeditation. Now they're panicking. They've been calling me constantly, begging me to testify that they didn't know about Miles's plans. Brianna even tried to convince me that she only helped Miles because she was afraid he would hurt himself if she didn't. My dad offered to sign over their house to me if I would help them avoid legal consequences. I refused and instead gave all the evidence I had collected to Hannah's lawyer. This includes screenshots of conversations where they admitted knowing about Miles's plan, voice messages where they threatened me for helping Hannah, and the recent messages where they tried to bribe me to lie for them. The most ironic part? They're now facing the possibility of losing their house, the same house they kicked me out of to help Miles with his scheme. They keep saying I'm destroying our family, but I reminded them that they destroyed our family the moment they chose to help Miles abandon his child. Miles, meanwhile, has stopped responding to anyone's messages since he found out about the legal proceedings. Lisa's roommate mentioned they had been planning to move to Arizona, and I passed this information to Hannah's lawyer. I'll update again when there are new developments, but for now, it seems karma is finally catching up with everyone involved. Update 3: It's been a while since my last update, and the situation has finally reached its conclusion. A lot has happened in these 3 months, so let me break it down. The legal proceedings against Miles were successful. Hannah's detailed documentation and the evidence of premeditated abandonment worked in her favor. The judge was particularly upset about Miles hiding assets and planning his escape while pretending to prepare for fatherhood. He's been ordered to pay $1,200 monthly in child support plus additional compensation for the expenses Hannah incurred during pregnancy and the first months of their daughter's life. The real justice came with the case against my parents. Their involvement in Miles's plan came back to bite them hard. The lawyer proved they were actively complicit in hiding assets and planning the abandonment of their granddaughter. The text messages where Brianna advised Miles on how to hide money and my dad's messages helping plan the timing of his escape were particularly damaging. The judge ordered them to pay a significant settlement to Hannah for their role in the deception. They had to sell the house to pay the settlement and their legal fees. They're now living in a small 2-bedroom apartment in the less desirable part of town, quite a change from their previous lifestyle. Brianna has been trying to reach me through various relatives and family friends, sending messages about how I've destroyed their lives by choosing that woman over family. She claims they've learned their lesson and deserve a second chance. My dad even tried to explain that they only helped Miles because that's what parents do and they never meant for things to go this far. The most pathetic attempt came when they sent my elderly aunt to my workplace to guilt trip me. She told me how Brianna cries herself to sleep every night and my dad has started drinking. Apparently, they're struggling to adjust to their new lifestyle and blame me for their downfall. I told my aunt that they should have thought about consequences before helping Miles abandon his child. As for Miles, he's still with Lisa in Arizona. Maria, Lisa's ex-roommate, told me they're working at some retail store and living in a studio apartment. He barely pays his court-ordered child support, always sending it late and often incomplete. When he does send money, he attaches notes about how unfair the whole situation is and how everyone ganged up against him. I've used the past few months productively. The money I saved living with Mike, combined with my regular income, allowed me to put a down payment on a small condo. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine, and no one can kick me out of it. Hannah and I have become good friends through all of this. She's moved into a nice 2-bedroom apartment and has found a job that allows her to work from home while taking care of little Emma. She's much stronger than anyone gave her credit for, and watching her rebuild her life has been inspiring. I visit them regularly and Emma is the sweetest baby. It's Miles's loss that he'll never know her. Brianna still tries to contact me through new numbers or social media accounts, usually with the same old story about how I should forgive Miles because he just wasn't ready to be a father. She seems to think that enough time has passed for everyone to forget what they did. My dad sends occasional emails about missing me and wanting to make amends, but neither of them has ever actually apologized for how they treated me. I've maintained my no contact policy with all of them. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being too harsh, but then I remember how quickly they threw me out, how they plotted to abandon an innocent woman and her baby, and how they only reached out when they needed something from me. I realize I'm better off without that kind of toxicity in my life. The family I've chosen, Mike, Hannah, and little Emma, is worth more than the family that repeatedly chose to hurt and betray me. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and letting karma do its work.